Classical Roots Era. The Classical Roots Era kicked off way before the modern world even had electricity. We're talking way back to the Baroque period, when music was dramatic, highly structured. Johann Sebastian Bach, the grand architect of this period, blended Italian flair, French elegance, and German depth like it was no big deal. His work defined how musical phrases could be built, layered, and twisted. And the guy was a productivity machine. He pumped out cantatas like it was his day job. Wait, it was. He didn't stop at sacred music either. He basically shaped how keyboard concertos should sound using the harpsichord and organ. Then came the Sons. CPE. Bach brought emotional roller coasters into music with unpredictable harmonies and sudden shifts in energy, which helped transition everything toward something clearer. His brother J. C. Bach didn't just hang out in London for the tea. He was writing symphonies and operas that caught Mozart's attention early on. That whole generation helped bridge the gap from complexity to clarity. By the time Viennese classicism rolled in, the texture had shifted. Composers dropped the dense polyphony and picked up cleaner melodies backed by chords. Sonata form, string quartets, and symphonies weren't just ideas. They became the new normal. And the orchestra, that beast evolved too. Basso Continuo got the boot, and now we had standardized setups with strings, brass, woodwinds, and timpani doing their thing. Thanks to the Mannheim school, orchestras started using techniques like crescendo and giving wind instruments some room to breathe and shine. Joseph Haydn made sure structure stayed king. The guy's called the father of the symphony and the father of the string quartet, which honestly sounds exhausting. He shaped how long pieces unfolded and turned them into emotionally charged but well-contained packages. His London symphonies especially showed just how far that format could stretch, mixing surprises and balance with those signature classical touches. Then Mozart shows up. This guy could write anything. Symphonies? Check. Chamber music? You bet. Opera? Absolutely. And with style. He mixed styles like a musical chef, Baroque's complexity with the clarity of the classical era, all topped with drama and character depth that made his operas pop. He even pulled in fugal textures straight from Bach's playbook and gave them a classical era makeover. And then there's Beethoven, the guy who blew the doors open. At first, he stuck to the classical rules, but he got louder, deeper, and way more intense. His middle and late symphonies took everything that came before and expanded it with force. He stretched the forms until they almost snapped, stuffed in emotional firepower, and made the orchestra a dramatic force of nature. His music felt like it was arguing with itself half the time. And that's a compliment. As the 19th century came rolling through, the seeds of romanticism were already sprouting. Franz Schubert took song and turned it into something deeply personal and lyrical. Robert Schumann pushed emotional themes into the spotlight. And by the time folks like Verdi and Wagner stepped onto the opera stage, they weren't holding back. Everything got bigger. Orchestras swelled, harmonies expanded, and the drama hit new highs. But they all borrowed from the structure set before them. That early groundwork, built by Bach, refined by Haydn, stretched by Mozart, and shaken up by Beethoven, created a musical universe where the ideas stayed strong, even as emotions and sighs exploded into the Romantic Age. Radio Era. The radio era was the wild transformation of music into a mass experience. Once phonographs shifted from acoustic to electrical recording, around 1925, suddenly music had depth, detail, and reach. Enrico Caruso's voice, once trapped in opera houses, made its way into homes around the globe. With new tech came better sound. Frequencies from 100 to 5,000 hertz meant you could actually hear emotion, not just noise. And even during the Great Depression, smart devices like the RCA Duo Jr. merged radios with turntables to keep those records spinning. Then came broadcast radio. Detroit's station 8MK kicked off news in 1920, and Pittsburgh's KDKA soon launched the commercial side of things. By the late 1920s, radios were everywhere, and by 1940, more than 80% of homes had one. These weren't just furniture pieces, they were lifelines to culture. Live remotes from jazz clubs and dance halls exploded across the airwaves, dragging regional sounds right into the national spotlight. Blues had been simmering since the late 1800s in the South, and by the early 20th century, it found a structure in 12-bar form and soul-bearing lyrics. Jazz popped up in New Orleans, melting down blues, ragtime, and Creole energy into something no one had ever heard. That first jazz recording, Livery Stable Blues, by the original Dixieland Jazz Band, came out in 1917. The jazz age followed, and thanks to records and radio, artists like Louis Armstrong and Jelly Roll Morton didn't stay local legends. They became icons. Paul Whiteman's orchestra, yes, even the white lead bands got airplay too. Radio had become jazz's stage. Swing wasn't far behind. The 30s brought the golden age of swing, with big bands leading the charge. Benny Goodman earned the nickname King of Swing, while Glenn Miller and Duke Ellington made serious noise in the charts. Swing wasn't just sound, it was movement. These bands toured, competed in battles, and lit up the airwaves. During World War II, big bands became tools of morale. Glenn Miller's performances for troops showed just how deeply music was tied to national spirit, until his tragic disappearance during a wartime flight. Still, the music played on, with NBC and CBS airing everything from barn dances to operas. Sponsored radio programs weren't just background, they were daily ritual. Country wasn't left behind. Jimmy Rogers and the Carter family put rural roots into recordings by the 1920s. Old-time fiddle bands and cowboy crooners made country a genre, but it was radio that pushed it national. Stations like WLS and WSM hosted barn dances, and shows like Grand Ole Opry gave the country sound a home. Gene Autry, Hank Williams, and even Patsy Montana all got a voice thanks to the mic. By the late 40s, bluegrass and country boogie added even more layers, with artists like Bill Monroe and Arthur Smith stretching the sound. The industry felt the shift. Records took a hit at first, but bounced back with tech advances and smarter marketing. Radio became the proving ground, but phonographs kept traditions alive. Classical, jazz, blues. If it was on wax, it had legs. And with 500,000 jukeboxes by 1940, listener demand was driving charts before Billboard even figured out how to keep up. Black radio stations popped up by the late 40s, giving artists like B.B. King a real shot. White audiences started buying race records, blurring genre and race lines, and laying the foundation for rhythm and blues, and eventually rock and roll. By the way, if you guys want to subscribe, I'm going to be posting every day. Thanks. Anyways, vinyl revolution era. The 50s were when music finally got its wardrobe and a new body to carry it around in. Vinyl took over where shellac left off, and the whole thing changed. No more crackling old records that shattered if you sneezed on them. Vinyl came in two sleek formats. The 33 1/3 revolutions per minute LP gave you 22 minutes per side, perfect for full albums and deeper listens. The 45 revolutions per minute single was built for jukeboxes, teen rooms, and fast hits. By the early 50s, both formats were everywhere, thanks to cheaper production and better durability. Suddenly, people weren't just listening, they were collecting. And nothing made people want to collect like the rise of rock and roll. Elvis Presley's explosion in 1954 out of Sun Records started with a cover of a blues track, but it wasn't just imitation. He mixed gospel, country, and blues until it became something new. By 1956, he didn't just chart, he owned it. 25 weeks at #1 and 9 singles in the top 10. That wasn't a career, that was a musical landslide. And every one of those hits spun on vinyl. Little Richard didn't just join the party, he lit the table on fire. In 1955, Tutti Frutti dropped like a lightning bolt. His vocal energy and wild delivery turned heads and raised heart rates. His hits just kept coming. Over 15 top 40 rhythm and blues singles by 1958. He didn't just perform, he exploded on stage. Vinyl turned those moments into permanent records, literally. Chuck Berry brought a whole new layer. He didn't just play guitar, he weaponized it. His songs from 1955 to 58, like Maybelline and Johnny B. Good, captured teenage dreams, high school dances, and rebellion. His lyrics were mini novels, and his riffs, they pretty much became rock and roll's DNA. And all of it, pressed into vinyl grooves, teens could spin until the needle wore out. Teen culture found its fuel. 45 singles let you own your favorite track, keep it, and spin it again and again. This wasn't communal like radio, it was personal. Record stores filled up. Charts responded to what kids actually bought. LPs brought more than music. They brought photography, notes, lyrics, artwork people could hold, stare at, and argue over. Vinyl became a total experience. And jukeboxes everywhere. Restaurants, arcades, bars. They were stocked with 45s, and the most played tracks often turned into chart toppers. Jukebox popularity even dictated label decisions and A-side picks. The music industry wasn't just selling sound, it was moving culture through tiny discs of black plastic. By the late 50s, vinyl ruled everything. Sales boomed, LPs offered serious artist showcases, singles moved faster than gossip, and what started with Elvis didn't stay in Memphis. Songs like Tutti Frutti and Johnny B. Good crossed the ocean and rewired Britain's music scene. Vinyl carried not just sound, but influence. And something else shifted. People noticed who was making the music. Black artists like Little Richard and Chuck Berry broke into white teen spaces. White artists like Elvis were echoing black traditions. For all its flaws, the vinyl boom did something radical. It pushed genres together. It helped music cross lines, audiences, and oceans. The vinyl record wasn't just a format, it was a fuse. Rock Renaissance era, The 60s weren't just a new chapter. They ripped out the old book and rewrote it with fuzz pedals, sitars, and protest signs. The Beatles lit the fuse. Formed in Liverpool in 1960, they exploded in the States by 1964 and launched the British invasion. Suddenly, American charts were crawling with British bands. Between 1964 and 70, the Beatles had the #1 single one out of every 6 weeks, and the #1 album 1 out of every 3. Not exactly subtle. Albums like Rubber Soul, Revolver, and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band did more than just sell. They flipped the studio into a creative instrument. Tape loops, string sections, backward vocals, and Eastern instruments weren't just novelties. They became staples, and they weren't alone. Psychedelic rock was born, mutated, and blasted into every basement and poster-stained dorm room by the mid-60s. San Francisco became a hotbed for the counterculture, and music followed suit. Revolver was already dabbling in reverse tape and experimental sounds, but things escalated fast. Tomorrow Never Knows basically sounded like it was written by someone mid-meditation and mid-hallucination. It wasn't just music anymore, it was an experience. Jimi Hendrix turned that experience into something people could feel in their ribs. His debut in the States set everything ablaze, and Electric Ladyland landed as his only #1 album. It wasn't just the riffs or the solos, it was how he manipulated feedback, reverb, and distortion like paint on a canvas. Hendrix made the guitar speak a whole new language, and that language was not gentle. While all that psychedelia spun in one direction, Motown spun another. Founded in Detroit, it pulled rhythm and blues into something slicker, tighter, and radio ready. Early Motown was loaded with hits. The Supremes, Marvin Gaye, the Four Top, and by the late 60s, things got trippier. Psychedelic soul blended groove with depth. The Temptations dropped Cloud 9 in 1968, and Sly and the Family Stone rolled out Everyday People the same year. Funkier beats, heavier themes, and a much bolder sound pushed the genre past pop and straight into revolution. Then there was the protest movement. Music stopped just being about fun and feelings. It started fighting, with civil rights, unrest, and the Vietnam War turning everything upside down. Folk rock rose like a clenched fist. Acoustic guitars met electric ones, and the lyrics didn't sugarcoat anything. Dylan, Baez, and others carved out a space where lyrics challenged the world, not just described it. The music became a tool of resistance, and stadiums turned into forums. Meanwhile, the music industry itself started to shift. Singles weren't the only game anymore. LPs were taking the wheel. Albums became cohesive projects, full of interconnected themes and experimental production. Sgt. Pepper and Pet Sounds weren't just hits, they were statements. You weren't just listening to a song, you were entering a world. The studio wasn't a room, it was an artist's playground. By the end of the 60s, rock music had changed from dance floor filler to cultural megaphone. Artists weren't just making sounds, they were shaping identities. Eastern philosophy, political unrest, social rebellion. It all spilled out of those records. Psychedelic rock, Motown soul, protest anthems. It wasn't clean or polite, but it was powerful. The decade didn't just birth music, it made music matter. Global sound era. The 70s tossed the rulebook into the lava lamp and let every sound find its corner. Disco started as a pulse inside clubs in New York and Philadelphia, spaces shaped by Black, Latino, and gay communities. It wasn't just a beat, it was a lifeline. They blended soul, funk, and Latin flavor into a 4-on-the-floor groove backed by orchestras and synth. By the time the rest of the world caught on, the club in Manhattan was already defining the vibe, laying the groundwork for DJ culture that would later shape hip-hop and house. Funk wasn't just rhythm, it was muscle. James Brown punched out the downbeat, and everyone else followed. Sly and the Family Stone, Parliament Funkadelic, and Earth, Wind and Fire turned every bar into a jam session. The Meters, Ohio Players, Chic, they each brought their own flavor, and it caught fire. Fela Kuti took it global with Afrobeat, turning it into a protest soundtrack. Funk used bass lines and grooves to deliver politics, dance, and rebellion all at once. Meanwhile, hip-hop was a spark in the Bronx. In the early 70s, DJs like Kool Herc figured out that isolating the drum breaks in funk and disco tracks made people lose their minds on the dance floor. Add a mic, a hype voice, some call and response, and you've got the earliest MCs stepping up. Africa Bambaataa and Grandmaster Flash took that formula and turned it into something bigger. Then in 1979, it broke the surface. The Fatback Band's King Tim III tested the waters, but Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang made the splash. It lifted the bass line from Cheek's Good Times and proved that rap could chart. It hit the top 40 in the US and stayed in the top 3 in the UK. That was hip-hop's first leap from block party to global playlist. At the same time, rock was cracking into 1,000 subgenres. Punk hadn't exploded just yet, but its blueprint was being sketched out in basements and garages. Glam rock threw glitter in everyone's face. Krautrock did weird things with synths. Southern rock, soft rock, prog rock, hard rock. They all split off into their own corners, pulling fans along with them. Rock was no longer one thing. It was a hydra with platform boots and eyeliner. And disco, funk, and punk weren't just sounds. They were scenes. They gave platforms to artists who didn't fit the mainstream mold. Female artists, queer voices, black musicians, all found lanes through these evolving genres. The 70s cracked the industry wide open, and cities like New York became a swirling blend of salsa, loft jazz, reggae, and whatever people could spin on a turntable. What made this decade wild wasn't just the music. It was how fragmented and connected it all was. Over 30 genre-defining movements took root. Dance floors were political. Block parties birthed entire movements. And for once, no single style dominated. Instead, everything happened at once. The decade created a new normal. Music was local, global, personal, and political. The 70s made music a reflection of every identity out there, and that's the sound that kept going. MTV era. The 80s didn't just put music on TV, they made it impossible to separate sound from image. MTV launched in August 1981 and immediately rewired how fans experienced music. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to have a hit song. You needed a video, a look, a presence. MTV wasn't background noise, it was cultural wildfire. Artists became visual storytellers, and fashion moved as fast as the beats. Michael Jackson didn't just break records, he broke boundaries. His Billie Jean video in 1983 was the first by a black artist to get heavy MTV rotation. Then came Thriller, a 14-minute epic that looked more like a movie premiere than a music video. It wasn't just about moonwalking, it was about making spectacle a standard. Madonna ran with that. Her Like a Virgin video and live MTV performance in a wedding dress redefined pop spectacle. Prince wasn't far behind. With Purple Rain and I Would Die For You, he took visual R&B to the next level, blending gender, genre, and genius into something unforgettable. Meanwhile, synth pop stormed in with neon and eyeliner. Built on synthesizers, drum machines, and cold futurism, bands like Depeche Mode, The Human League, New Order, and Erasure gave the early 80s a brand new pulse. These weren't just bands, they were aesthetic projects. Their videos were sleek, strange, and stylish, shaping how electronic music would look and feel. Then glam metal kicked the door off its hinges. Spandex, teased hair, and loud guitars filled screens and arenas alike. On the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles, Mötley Crüe, Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, and Rat were turning every music video into a hairspray commercial with backup amps. MTV's Headbangers Ball pumped these visuals into homes everywhere, making glittery hard rock an actual household genre. Rap didn't sit on the sideline. Run DMC burst through with Rockbox, the first rap video to land on MTV. Then they joined forces with Aerosmith in Walk This Way, blowing up both genres and pulling hip-hop into the mainstream with a sledgehammer. It wasn't just music, it was cultural fusion. Run DMC were the first rap group to earn a gold album, a platinum album, and to headline Live Aid. MTV couldn't ignore hip-hop anymore, and the shift was real. The industry itself shifted too. Albums weren't just records, they were packages. Music became a full-body brand. The artwork, the outfit, the choreography, the eyeliner. MTV's Video Vanguard Award wasn't just a trophy, it was a statement. The Beatles, David Bowie, Michael Jackson, and Madonna all picked one up early on, confirming that video had become as important as the music itself. Genres collided and flourished. You had synth pop for the cool kids, glam metal for the headbangers, rap for the revolutionaries, and pop stars, ruling everything in between. The 80s weren't neat, they were electric, messy, and ultra-visual. The camera didn't blink, and neither did the audience. Music wasn't just about sound anymore. It was about identity, performance, and screens that never turned off. In the MTV era, if you didn't have the visuals, you weren't in the game. CD, boom era. The 90s hit like a sonic freight train, and the compact disc was riding shotgun. By the early part of the decade, CDs overtook vinyl and cassettes, thanks to their durability, longer runtime, and ability to include bonus content. By the mid-90s, CDs were responsible for more than 80% of music sales in the United States. Artists could pack their albums with extra tracks, fancier liner notes, and flashy cases. This wasn't just a format shift, it was a full-on commercial explosion. Multi-platinum albums weren't rare, they were expected. Everyone from Nirvana to Dr. Dre to the Backstreet Boys was going platinum, diamond, or both. Grunge stormed out of Seattle and slapped the music world awake. Nirvana's Nevermind in 1991 flipped the charts upside down, followed closely by Pearl Jam's 10. These weren't just hits, they were revolutions. Labels scrambled to sign more alt-rock acts. Alice in Chains and Soundgarden joined the scene. By 1994, Green Day's Dookie and the Offspring's Smash brought punk's raw energy back into the mainstream, both going multi-platinum. Radio and MTV blasted them non-stop. And while guitars were shredding, gangsta rap was booming. Dr. Dre's The Chronic and Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style rewrote what rap albums could sound like. The East Coast fired back with Notorious B.I.G.'s Ready to Die and Nas's Illmatic. Tupac's All Eyes on Me and Wu-Tang's 36 Chambers added grit, narrative, and myth. Hip-hop wasn't underground anymore. It was top of the charts. And thanks to CDs, it was in cars, bedrooms, and boomboxes across the country. Pop punk didn't just sneak in, it cannonballed into the pool. Green Day kept the fire burning there through the decade. By the time Blink-182's Enema of the State dropped in 1999, it had sold over 15 million copies. The sound was rebellious, but accessible. Angsty, but catchy. Teens ate it up, and radio couldn't get enough. Then came the boy bands. The late 90s belonged to bubblegum pop with a slick sheen. Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Britney Spears, and Christina Aguilera all stormed the charts. Their secret weapon, MTV's Total Request Live. Launched in 1998, TRL didn't just show videos, it crowned kings and queens of teen culture. Viewers voted, artists performed, hosts hyped everything. NSYNC's debut album hit the top 10, and their follow-up, No Strings Attached, set a new bar for first-week sales. The TRL crowd turned pop stars into stadium fillers. MTV once again became a tastemaker. TRL mixed Countdown with interviews and live performances, creating a new kind of pop fan. Album drops were timed around appearances. CD sales spiked after high TRL ranking. It wasn't just what people heard, it was what they saw every day after school. The synergy between CDs and TV was complete, and somehow, all of it coexisted. Grunge, gangsta rap, pop punk, and polished pop shared the same shelves, the same screens, and often the same fans. The 90s didn't pick a favorite, they celebrated the chaos. Thanks to the CD boom and MTV's continued grip, music wasn't just entertainment. It was a lifestyle, a marketplace, and a generational soundtrack all at once. Digital download era. The 2000s didn't just tweak the music industry, they blew it up and reassembled it in ones and zeros. Napster dropped in June 1999 and pretty much shoved the old system off a cliff. Suddenly, anyone with a modem and some angst could download whatever they wanted for free. By 2001, Napster had around 80 million users and was clogging up college networks with MP3 traffic. CD sales tanked, down 33% globally in 2000 alone. Lawsuits followed, but by the time Napster was shut down in mid-2001, the damage was done. The CD wasn't king anymore, and music was no longer chained to plastic. Then Apple stepped in. The iTunes Store launched in April 2003 with 200,000 tracks, and boom, 1 million downloads in the first week. By March 2004, it had moved 50 million songs. People were suddenly paying for music again, but this time, it was one track at a time. The album as a concept took a hit. iTunes let users cherry-pick singles, and by September 2009, more than 8.6 billion songs had been downloaded. It wasn't enough to stop the revenue freefall, though. Industry profits slid from around $14.6 billion in 1999 to just under $9 billion by 2008. MP3s were now the standard. Music had gone portable, on demand, and hyper-personal. Listeners didn't need full albums, they just wanted that one song. Artists and labels adapted. They stopped thinking in long form and started strategizing single drops. The entire release game shifted, and playlists began to replace track lists. But through all the chaos, some artists thrived. Eminem rode the line between physical and digital with The Eminem Show in 2002, one of the first albums to go diamond in the digital age. Coldplay leaned into the iTunes model, with Speed of Sound becoming the billionth download on the platform in 2006. Albums like X and Y and Viva La Vida kept their label, EMI, alive while others stumbled. Beyoncé built an empire in both formats. Her single Halo, released in 2009, went double platinum in the US and climbed the charts globally. Her digital savvy and visual albums laid the groundwork for future release strategies. Meanwhile, the industry tried to claw back control. The RIAA sued Napster in 2000 and launched an all-out war on piracy. But even as they cracked down, they learned iTunes offered legal alternatives, and its 99-cent pricing reshaped what music was worth. Some argued it killed the album era faster than Napster ever did. Others said it expanded access and gave fans real choice. Either way, things weren't going back. Piracy also had an unintended effect. It turned the internet into a discovery engine. Word of mouth, forums, and MP3 blogs helped unknown artists find fans. Labels started watching download numbers and social buzz instead of waiting for radio charts. The iTunes rankings became their new compass. The digital download era was messy, fast, and disruptive. But it didn't just destroy the old model. It built the foundation for the streaming world to come. This was the moment music stopped being a product and became a service, a file, and a lifestyle. Streaming takeover era. The 2010s didn't just change music, they digitized its entire bloodstream. By the middle of the decade, streaming had bulldozed CDs and taken over radio's long-standing spot as the go-to source for music. Services like Spotify and YouTube weren't just options, they were the main event. In 2017, global streaming revenue hit $6.6 billion, overtaking CDs for the first time. In the UK, people aged 15 to 24 cut their radio listening by 40% between 2010 and 2018. That drop didn't happen by accident. Streaming was now the norm. Spotify led the charge. Editorial and algorithmic playlists replaced radio programming. Getting on a playlist like Rap Caviar or Today's Top Hits could launch a song into viral orbit. Radio DJs no longer held the keys. Platform editors and machine learning did. Drake surfed this wave better than anyone else. He became the most streamed artist of the entire decade, pulling in over 28 billion streams on Spotify. His track One Dance became the first song to break 1 billion streams on the platform. Then God's Plan shattered single-day streaming records in 2018, 14 million on Apple Music and over 4 million on Spotify. And My Feelings wasn't just a hit. It peaked with 116 million US streams in a week. Taylor Swift wasn't far behind. She became Spotify's most streamed female artist and eventually the first to reach over 100 million monthly listeners. Her album, The Tortured Poets Department, landed 315 million streams in a single day. That's not just domination, it's a different league. Kendrick Lamar used his own strategy, quality and timing. His monthly Spotify listeners climbed from 52 million to 77 million following just a few major releases. His albums became both critical events and streaming juggernauts. And YouTube, still a powerhouse. Music videos didn't just exist for fun anymore. They pushed chart metrics. A viral video could turn a song from niche to global in days. YouTube gave artists audio and visual leverage. Adding another layer to the streaming takeover, the industry didn't just shift, it transformed. By 2017, streaming subscriptions accounted for about 80% of all streaming activity. But not everyone was thrilled. Artists called out the platforms for laughably low payouts per stream. Labels got flack for allegedly buying their way onto playlists. And yet, more artists than ever found visibility. Between 2017 and 2020, indie representation on playlists jumped from 38% to 55%. The playing field wasn't level, but it was wider. The playlist became king. Discovery was no longer organic. It was algorithmic. Singles mattered more than albums, and an artist's Spotify profile was as important as their tour schedule. Drake, Taylor, Kendrick, they ruled the new system, but countless others used playlists to build followings from scratch. The 2010s gave us a new musical economy. Streaming replaced ownership. Playlists replaced albums. Algorithms replaced gatekeepers. And for better or worse, the system wasn't built around what you bought. It was built around what you played, skipped, and repeated. Music wasn't just consumed anymore. It was tracked, optimized, and quantified in real time. The era didn't just change how we listen, it changed what we listen to and why. DIY era. The 20s didn't just hand over the keys to the music industry, they ripped off the gate and let everyone inside. TikTok turned into the new A&R department during the lockdown era. One viral sound and an artist could go from a bedroom to the Billboard Hot 100. Olivia Rodrigo proved it with Driver's License, staying at #1 for 9 straight weeks. Tyla's Water rode viral momentum out of South Africa and into global streams. TikTok didn't just make stars out of newcomers, it supercharged the reach of artists like Billie Eilish, Doja Cat, SZA, and Lil Nas X. Billie Eilish stayed at the top of the streaming pyramid. She passed 48 billion Spotify streams, and in June 2024, she crossed 100 million monthly listeners, only the third youngest to do so. Her album, Hit Me Hard and Soft, pulled in 72.7 million streams on day one and hit 2 billion by mid-2025. Olivia Rodrigo launched fast, and didn't slow down. Driver's License went nuclear in 2021, and Good For You helped bring pop rock back to life. This was a moment where emotional honesty met algorithmic reach, and it wasn't just new names. Even Beyoncé reinvented herself with Renaissance, channeling house music through a DIY-attuned lens. Genre boundaries completely collapsed. Hyperpop exploded with its robotic vocals, glitchy beats, and online-born chaos. Artists like Charlie XCX and A.G. Cook pushed the style into the mainstream. Drill from New York and the UK became a playlist staple due to Pop Smoke. Afro beats carved out global attention. Digicore, Jersey Club, and breakcore found space in the mix too. You weren't picking genres anymore, you were scrolling through them. AI also crashed the studio session. Tools helped with beat creation, melodic structures, even full mastering. ByteDance folded AI tools into creator apps. Now, people share AI-assisted tracks like it's normal, which honestly, it is. AI's not replacing artists, it's becoming their co-pilot. Independence became a selling point. Platforms allowed artists to record, distribute, promote, and profit without a label. Billie and Olivia both got signed young, but their rise came through streams, not radio. Direct-to-fan communication became standard. From Taylor Swift's surprise releases to Mitski's lyrical monologues, the parasocial bond between fan and artist went full throttle. Sad Girl Autumn wasn't just a vibe. It was a platform-driven marketing wave. The sound of the decade so far is fragmented, fast-moving, and fiercely personal. The rules are gone. Anyone with a beat and a point of view can make a dent. Fans aren't just streaming music, they're in the comments, in the DMs, remixing, reusing, and reimagining tracks before they've even cooled down. Artists aren't waiting for gatekeepers, they're their own managers, producers, and publicists. In the DIY era, virality, intimacy, and control all live in the same timeline. The artist is the brand, the studio, the label, and the algorithm whisperer. It's chaotic, raw, and wide open. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.